All right. Good morning, everybody. My name is Matt Curran. I'm here with Vita. Vita, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well.
Doing well. This is going to be a great interview. I'm really excited about this. Vita is with a nonprofit, and they are using Convene. But before we get to talk about your nonprofit, let's talk about you. So just tell me a little bit about yourself, where you come from, and how you got involved with your nonprofit.
I live in Greensboro, North Carolina. I have been active in nonprofit work my whole life, but just as a volunteer. And so I was severely abused as a child, and I was very active on a couple of message boards for healing from child abuse. And so that's how I got first involved with serving on the board of directors for them. And we're talking teeny, teeny, tiny charities.
Yeah.
And so God called me into ministry in 2017, and I really did not feel called to working in a church. And then I saw this job posting for Yokefellow Prison Ministry. And what appealed to me was really honestly that it was from a telecommuting job from home, part-time. I was in school full-time at Liberty University online, earning my degree in Christian ministry. So when I saw that, I prayed over it, and I really felt like God was calling me to prison ministry. And I came to just realize that so many people in prison have been traumatized. And so even though I haven't been in prison, I understand the traumatized mind. And so it just wound up being a really good fit.
Yeah. So one of the ways that we connected is because I have my degree in Christian counseling from Liberty as well. So that's a wonderful thing. And I think that there's so many people out there like yourself and like me that can use, what we're going to talk about later with Convene and how they can tie it into how they're helping people. And that's really what it is about. It's about helping people. And so I love that about you because, and then I also love the idea of, you went through a tough time. All right. So I love the idea of peer-to-peer counseling. Right. And that's really
Yes.
a lot of what you're doing. You're doing
Mm-hmm.
peer-to-peer counseling. So tell me a little bit about that. How do you feel that you're able to relate to some of the prisoners?
Well, the way that Yokefellow Prison Ministry works, I have to start with sort of explaining what
Yeah,
we do to even answer your question. Um,
absolutely.
when, when people hear prison ministry, they typically think about bringing Bibles in, doing Bible studies, having evangelism, that kind of thing, or church services. But we're actually different. For 50 years, what we have been doing is recruiting volunteers from the community that go into the prisons to meet with the inmates, ideally once a week, if we can get that time slot, to sit and listen to them. Because if you think about it, if you are in prison, people don't care what you think. They just
Yeah.
want you to behave and not escape,
Yeah.
not do violence. And so we have volunteers going in, we divide into small groups, and the volunteers just ask, what would you like to talk about? What's on your heart? And so we'll have people that may come in very resistant to God, and they may honestly just be going to have something to do. It may not have anything whatsoever to do with religion, but what they find are people who actually care about them.
Yeah.
And so it's a gift of listening, a gift of saying, you matter enough for me to take time out of my day to come once a week just to spend time with you. And then we find that over time, as they come to realize they develop a sense of value because someone from the outside values them to come in. And then long term, they want to explore the God who is sending these people in to care about them. And so we are primarily a listening and relationship building ministry. And listening ministry, even though it wasn't structured like this, is what helped heal me from my child abuse.
Yeah.
Because I found that in my church, when I would be in small groups for Sunday school or Bible studies, I would repeatedly just bring up my pain. And I kept waiting for people to tell me, okay, quit talking about it.
Yeah.
And I always thought I'd wear them out, but they listened to me and they valued me. And
Yeah.
the same process happened with me. I just came to realize maybe I do have value, not only to these people, but to the God who is in these people.
Yeah.
And so I've been able to take what I personally experienced, and now this is the ministry that I do.
Absolutely. So here's, what I believe. I believe we all have a story. We all have a background of where we come from, but we often feel like that we're walking alone. And
Mm-hmm.
we feel like we're going through this journey, no matter what our journey is. We feel like there's nobody there. Nobody can relate to us. And that's not true. I mean, the truth is there's it might not be the exact same story, but there's somebody out there walking through the same walk that you've been through.
Mm-hmm.
And it's important that we connect with others and we share our story and we share how we made it through that. How
Yeah.
did you overcome that? How did you get through that? And there's so many people that just feel like they're isolated, that
Mhm.
I'm the only one. I'm the only one who's been through this. That's not the case.
Right.
So when that's where, you get into that, what you guys do at Yokefellow and that peer-to-peer ministry and just having that ability to listen and say, you know what, okay, so maybe I haven't been to prison, but here's my story, right?
Mhm.
Here's my story. And you open up those doors, and that leads to being able to, share the word of God, being able to help these people in a different way, to know that, hey, you can overcome this, you can get past this. So that's
Right.
my belief, and I know that's your belief,
Mhm.
because we've talked
Yes.
about it. So that's really, really good. So where does Yokefellow work? I mean, how many prisons are y'all in, and how does that work?
We are in, I think it's 37 of the, no, actually, yeah, 37 of the 55 prisons across the state of North Carolina. The reason I'm tripping on the numbers is they're running together now because we've also launched in a juvenile detention center,
Okay.
which we technically is a different category. And then we also have a couple of what we call aftercare programs or post-incarceration ministry. So,
Yeah.
but there are 55 prisons across the state of North Carolina, state prisons,
Yeah.
plus 2 federal prisons. And so we are serving roughly 37, 38 of the prisons and also these other types of ministries.
Wow. Wow. So how many volunteers do you guys have, or how many people, choose to help out I know it might probably fluctuates, but how does that work?
Well, in our database, we have around 400 volunteers
Oh,
across the state, and then some are active, some are inactive. Like as an example, we have some elderly women in the western part of the state that love going weekly while the weather's good.
yeah.
But in the wintertime, they don't feel comfortable going in the snow and the ice. And most of our ministry also takes place after dark.
Yeah.
And so right now they're on inactive status, but once we hit spring, they will go active again. Um, and so ideally they're going in weekly for 60 to 90 minutes. Our ideal is weekly for 90 minutes. That's what we ask, but we have to go with whatever the prison has available.
Yeah, absolutely. That's really cool. So 400 people, and let's jump into talk about how we met and talk about a little bit about Convene, because obviously with 400 plus people that are volunteering for you,
Mm-hmm.
you want them to go into uh, the prisons with, on the same sheet of music, on the same,
Right.
sort of background, sharing the same message or somewhat of the same message. So that brought you to Convene. So talk about that, like how, about Convene and, the journey you've been through to get to Convene, because this is important.
All right. Well, I volunteer with a ministry called Tabitha Ministry, and a member, one of the staff members there, learned about Convene through, I can't even remember the name of it, through a completely different ministry.
Yeah.
And she is not as tech savvy as I am, and so she asked me if I would join her on a conference call to learn about the possibilities for Tabitha Ministry. And we do see lots of possibilities for that ministry, but that ministry doesn't have the bandwidth for their staff.
Yeah.
And as we were talking, I was thinking, this is what we've been looking for Yokefellow.
Yeah.
And I've been with Yokefellow for over 2 years now, and I come from a background of teaching online. And so I know a lot about using an online format, providing videos, testing everything online. And so I wanted, one of our challenges with Yokefellow is we have 400 volunteers, but they're not here in Greensboro.
Yeah.
They're all over the state. And so we do want them trained because we don't want this listening ministry to turn into Bible study or worship services. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but other churches are filling that gap.
Yeah.
And if Yokefellow morphs into something that it isn't, then we lose the one place these inmates have to go to feel heard. So we schedule 3 regional trainings every year, but it's expensive.
Yeah.
Because we have to go to different parts of the state, get a hotel room because I'm not driving 3-4 hours doing a training and coming back, and then we also have the challenge for our volunteers because North Carolina is a big state.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so even if we have a training, let's say in New Bern, that's still a long drive if you're in Wilmington, you know. And so we were thinking, what if we could make online training available? Then volunteers that have the option if they want to travel, but from the privacy of their home or the local library, they could learn everything they need to know and get certified, online. But our big challenge was where to house this kind of training,
Yeah.
because I know how to create the training, but I am not this tech person who can build it. We have our website is through WordPress, and there are different, we had an intern who was looking to maybe LearnDash, which I just don't know much about, and we lost her before it was set up. And so I'm not joking, for 2 years, we've been trying to figure out, how do we do this?
Yeah.
And so when I went to this meeting for Tabitha Ministry about Convene, I just realized we found what we're looking for, and the best part was it's completely free.
Yeah, that's right. It's free. And so when you're doing, and that's important, and I want everybody to know, like, that is the one thing that I love. Okay, again, in my heart, what is Convene about? Convene is about making a difference in people's lives. That's really what I feel. And I want people to understand that you're able to share within Convene. You're able to share your story. You're able to share your experience. You're able to train the people that work for you. You're able to do all this. But for nonprofits, you're never going to pay a dime, because that's what nonprofits are out there doing. They're out there making a difference in people's lives. And so I'm glad you brought up that point, because that's important. So if you're a nonprofit, you do this for free. And that's important, that you're able to do that. So now, so talk about a little bit about, you got in, and what have you done inside of it?
Well, we set up a group. So the group is for Yokefellow volunteers, but we have it open. And so I'm happy to have anyone all over the world, if they want to come learn what we do, they are welcome to it. We happily accept donations from anywhere.
Yeah, that's right.
So we set up a group, and so I set up, I come from the training world, and so we use the term modules, but Convene's term for the same thing is experiences. So I just thought through, what are the modules or experiences we wanted to cover for our volunteers. So we came up with 7, and the first one is more of an introduction, just who Yokefellow is and our background. And number 7 is really about next steps. And it's really the 5 in the middle. They're getting to the nuts and bolts. A big topic that we've got to cover is respecting prison boundaries. If you're not dressed appropriately, they will not even let you in the prison.
Yeah.
If you bring in something that's contraband that seems innocent enough, like bringing someone a crucifix, you can't do that. So we need to cover that kind of information. And then also, as we've already discussed, that it's a listening ministry. So we set up 7 modules. And we set up so when you first log into the group, you're able to see a syllabus, and so people can see what's going to be covered, and there's a hyperlink to jump you right over to experience number 1. And we set up the videos in YouTube, and I've got a lot of experience with YouTube, which was great. So we can even take in YouTube, we've added the captioning. So if we have someone who's hearing impaired, then they can, or just doesn't have volume working, on their computer, they can follow along. And then we've set up tests. So we've got 10 question multiple choice tests. Volunteers need to get at least 70% to pass. And then if they don't, then we can just reset it. They can watch the video again and try again. And then we also have, we've got 7 videos followed by 7 tests. And then there's also a survey at the end. And so once they complete all that, we even have certificates that we can print out. And it's got our individual logo on it, which is really neat. So once someone has passed all 7 of the experiences, passed all of the tests, then they're ready. They do not need to drive to New Bern or drive to Raleigh or wherever we're holding these regional trainings. They're good to go.
Yeah, that's awesome. And that's really good. And I think through the learning process that you are going to take people through, that's one of the great things about Convene, is that they should not have an issue passing those tests. And I think that that's really important, because that's the way it's set up. We walk through an open-ended shared learning process and really allow people to really thrive and do well and learn from others and everything like that. So that's really cool. So that's in there, and it's in the Convene Hope and Support community, which is really great, because what y'all are really doing is going out and providing hope and support for people that are in prison, and letting you know there's life after this, and hopefully. So that's so cool. So good. So that you have modules in there. You have also a group where you can communicate with anybody. You could set up subgroups, all that. So all that functionality is in there. So I could not be happier than Yokefellow leading the charge of nonprofits.
Right. And since you mentioned subgroups, I'm going to be bringing this up with our board of directors later in the month. We're having a retreat. What we have set up so far is just for volunteer training, but we could actually use training for our local coordinators, because each prison, like I said, we're in around 37 of the prisons. Each one has a volunteer local coordinator who is responsible for keeping it just what it says. I mean, just coordinating everything. Coordinate with the prison. If there's a snowstorm, is the Yokefellow meeting canceled that night? If there's any sort of issues, it's just that person is the liaison between the prison and the volunteers. Well, they need their own training. And we actually haven't really been doing, they have a manual, but we haven't really done formal training. Now we have a platform that we can do using a subgroup. And then we also have done more informal training for our members for board of directors. But we've been thinking, how neat would this be to have a subgroup for a new member of our board of directors that just runs them through everything to expect. And so we see ourselves expanding from, right now we've only fixed the volunteers, but this is where we're looking at heading.
That's right. Because you don't need to sleep, Vita. You just need to.
I have a little bit of energy.
That's right. But no, and that's the purpose, right? So you can you can have a private group within there. So that have that private group, and I want to touch on that here in a second too. But you can have a private group, and only the people that come into that group are the people you allow into that group. So that's important. That if you're a nonprofit, now you and I have been talking, is that to get that private access, it will give you that private access for free. So that's important. So if you're a nonprofit, you're watching this video, make sure that you get our email and email us, because we will give you that access for free. That's important that people know, because other people use it for other things, and it's a paid thing for not if you're not a nonprofit. So that's important. So that's really cool. But so the flexibility is there, and you can continue to grow with it if you see fit, which is great. Well, Vita, this is wonderful. So how do you hope this changes? I mean, you've already talked about it, but how do you really hope that this changes how you've been able to train people and bring them together, all your people that are volunteering for you out there?
Well, one thing that I'm hoping is that we'll just have far more people being trained. Because you do get trained before you get certified to even go into the prison. But we have people who have been doing Yokefellow ministry for 20 years. And so they're kind of, well, what do I need to be trained for? But we will have people who've been volunteering for a number of years who have a headache, and they think, oh, let me bring some aspirin, and they totally forget that violates prison rules. And we have actually had people that have had, it's called you need a blue card. There's a formal name, but no one ever uses it. You have to have a blue card issued from the prison to allow you to volunteer in it. Well, we have had volunteers have their blue cards banked for bringing in medication without getting that cleared first. So there are things you can get used to going in, and even though they're doing our ministry appropriately, it can be easy to forget you are in a prison. You've got to abide by those rules. So ideally, we would like everyone every year just having a continuing education update. But people don't want to drive, 2 hours and spend that time and spend 4 hours of their Saturday to do this. And so I see Convene being a wonderful way to do that. And another thing that I see going forward for the board of directors is that right now we mostly interact. We meet quarterly because they're all over so most of our communication between those meetings are through email. What if we were to open a subgroup so only the board of directors could go in there, and so we could have more discussions on Convene that's private, so we don't have other people able to access it, but we don't flood everyone's email either.
So, and that's all built into the group feature, right? That's all built into the group discussion boards. And so you just hit on some things that people may not know that Convene offers in the groups. There is that discussion board. There is a private discussion board. And so people tend to miss the emails and the constant flow of emails, you can have that communication, you have that discussion board. And that's so important to do that in one spot. It's also important to know that, you do get an email the discussion board happens. So you are notified, hey, there's a discussion board that you can participate in. So that's good. But I wanted to touch back on, you talked about, you were talking about the aspirin, and for example, that's why I call them experiences, right? And that's why, because we learn in life through experiences, right? So just as you talked about, you share your experiences with others about and connect with them. So, but there's little things like, hey, I went into the prison and this happened. I was engaging a prisoner and this happened. I took aspirin in and they did not like that, and they took my blue card. This happened. So if I'm one of them and I'm sharing that experience, and just a simple experience. So you have your syllabus, but you could have other simple experiences. And remember, anybody can write an experience. So after people get used to being in the system, they can write an experience. And then when they submit it, guess who it comes to? It'll come to you, within that group. And then you can read it and approve it or add to it, So that's a wonderful thing. Now you get your people who are volunteers. Now they're engaging in a part of Convene. But it's sharing those experiences, right? Sometimes a little thing was like, hey, I forgot, I went in my purse, there was aspirin, and they weren't happy about that and pulled my card.
Right.
Now other people can read that and they can say, oh, that's happened to me, So it's that back and forth shared learning. That's part of that learning process. So it's really, really cool.
Yeah, I also see a real potential for our local coordinators in a subgroup as well for experiences, because a local coordinator has to deal with things on the fly. Like, they can talk to the staff members afterward, but they have to deal with on the fly. What do you do if an inmate seems to have a little too much interest in a particular volunteer? Or the other way around, what if there's a volunteer that seems a little too interested in a particular inmate and that needs to be dealt with? They have the staff to support them, but if you consider that we have 30-something local coordinators across the state, each one could post an experience. This is what I'm dealing with here. How have you handled that? And in considering neither my colleague nor I have been local coordinators, we can provide guidance, but really it's the other local coordinators who have that experience to be able to give them even better advice than we can.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's what it's for. Again, another private group that only your local coordinators have the access to. And now they're able to share amongst themselves. And really, again, it offers that functionality to really support each other and to really, So you see, connecting all the dots. That's perfect. That's
and it's free. I mean,
it's free.
We're on a shoestring budget. So I'm telling you, as an executive director of a nonprofit, we really appreciate this.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad to do it. Like I said, one of the things that I love about you is that, one, we're both Liberty grads, but we went to Liberty, and we both have it, on our heart to help people. And that's really important. And that's really, so Convene is a learning management system. It is a training system, but it's also a sharing. There's so much about it, and you can find your different ways to use it. But, ultimately, it can be all those things. You can sell your content, whatever it is for you. Ultimately, it is there to help people, and it is there to share your experiences and knowledge and just what you walk through in life, because that's how we learn. That's how we learn. We learn through you and I sitting down and saying, hey, if you were in this situation, how would you handle it? And you say, well, I was in that situation. This is what I went through. This is how I overcame, and to share the message. So that's really how it's designed. That's what it's about, So I love it. So I really appreciate you doing this podcast with me. If you want to learn more about Yokefellow Ministry, obviously you might be seeing this on YouTube, or might be seeing this on Facebook or some other social media, or you might be seeing it on convenecommunities.com. There will be a nice write-up about Yokefellow and what you guys do along with this video. So I appreciate you being on here with me. I really appreciate you being a great example of how a nonprofit can use Convene. So thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. We really appreciate everything Convene has done for us.
All right. Well, great. So I look forward to continue to work with you and continue to help. So thank you.
Thanks.
Later.